is being recorded because as part of International OA Week, we've managed to fall, this session has managed to fall in that. So it is going to be recorded for members of GOA-ON across the globe who are also part of International OA, and hopefully some of them are joining us online as well. So to kick us off, we've got Bronte Tilbrook, which is really lovely. He's come in to give us a little bit of an overview of the current state of knowledge on the Southern Ocean with respect to ocean acidification, and also really give that, I guess, expert overview of the policy involved and where it's tracking. And then I will introduce what we're hoping to establish and really kick off here today, which is the Southern Ocean OA Hub that we are hoping to have people become members of. I'm going to leave it over to you. Thanks, Bronte.
Thank you. This is, I think, a really important initiative to improve our understanding of how ocean acidification is going to impact ecosystems in the Southern Ocean. And I just want to acknowledge, I'm going to talk most about GOA-ON and then some of the observational data that's available to understand how conditions are changing. I just want to acknowledge GOA-ON is actually very effective at forming partnerships, as SOOS is, and some of the key organisations that GOA-ON, or Global Ocean Acidification Observing Network, is involved with the International Atomic Energy Agency, their Ocean Acidification Coordination Centre. It's shown by the logos down the bottom, the NOAA's Ocean Acidification Program, and the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission. So what is GOA-ON? Well, it has three main goals: to understand how ocean acidification is changing in the ocean, and to understand how ecosystems might respond to that change, and to make that data and knowledge available for improving ocean modelling and its impacts. Now, to do this, to meet these goals, GOA-ON has initiated a number of activities. It has over 900 members from 114 countries. Shown in the top right, the black outlined countries are where members exist. It's developed regional collaboration hubs, of which this is one. I'll come back to in a minute. Data portals, best practices guidelines. It's built capacity through interaction with the International Atomic Energy Agency and other groups like the Ocean Foundation. It's developed mentoring programs for early career researchers or other researchers that want to get more experience in ocean acidification. Communication through COP and other activities, and science policy links, including, one example of a collaboration is with the International Alliance to Combat Ocean Acidification, which is developing ocean acidification programs for governments. So very successfully. So one of the activities, again, is the development of hubs. These are the hubs that exist, and Southern Ocean will soon join this list. And you can access them on the website to understand what they're doing. What do the hubs do? Well, they're actually at the basis of understanding, bringing together regional knowledge and expertise to, they're aimed to facilitate collaboration across countries and organisations within countries, to identify the gaps in capability and build on better observing systems, to set priorities, to deliver data products for decision makers. And a part of their work is too to help with community outreach and education on the impacts of ocean acidification, and also to contribute through intergovernmental organisations like the Sustainable Development Goal 14.3 for ocean acidity, and the World Meteorological's headline organisation's headline climate indicator for ocean acidification, and the Decade of Ocean Science, which has an ocean acidification research program called OARS. So there's a lot of potential input through GOA-ON and SOOS to these to developing the research. One of the really neat developments in GOA-ON has been the data portal, which is called the GOA-ON Explorer. It's again accessible through the website, and it shows where there are assets in the water that are measuring ocean acidification parameters. And I just wanted to point out the Southern Ocean isn't well covered. There's plenty of room for expansion and improvement. And an example of what it delivers is shown in the bottom left. There's an yellow circled ship icon. If you click on that icon, there's small icons around. If you click on any of the icons, it'll tell you what's being measured, who's doing it, how to access the data. So it's really a link to developing, to improving data coverage. A lot of the data that's used to understand ocean acidification in this region is from two products: the Global Ocean Data Analysis product, or GOA-ON, shown on the left, and the Surface Ocean CO2 data atlas, which is called SOCAT, shown on the right. The dark blue lines are just where data are collected, and it's about over the last 40 years. These are major data sets that are uniformly quality controlled. They're updated regularly. Next year, there will be updates of both databases. And they form the basis of developing synthesis products. So here's an example of one from called Ocean Soda. And the top two figures on the left show pH change for 2022 and the aragonite saturation state, which is developed from those databases. And the bottom left panels show the change over 40 years from 1982 to 2022 for pH and aragonite saturation state. So they're two key OA conditions. And I just wanted to point out that they're different. They're not, OA is driven by CO2 uptake, but they have different responses, and that's due to effects of temperature and alkalinity and dissolved inorganic carbon ratios changes. So, yeah, it's not all just, they don't all track the same. So there's bigger changes in pH in the Southern Ocean, aragonite saturation state, over the last 40 years. Those databases are also key to developing indicators of what will happen in the future under different emission scenarios. This is one that was released by Jiang in 2023 at NOAA, and it shows on the left the low emission scenario where waters in the Southern Ocean will stay saturated out to 2100 if we can ever meet that emission scenario, which seems doubtful. And as the emissions increase, we'll progress to potentially the one on the right, which is a high emission scenario, which seems most likely at present, where the Southern Ocean will be undersaturated in surface waters by 2100, certainly earlier than that. This is not a particularly good indicator for calcifying organisms, and perhaps others. But the major changes happening in the Southern Ocean, it's really important that we develop our observing capability there. And I wanted to point this out. So how well are we doing? These maps look great, and we have to look in more detail at how well the observing system's doing. And this figure shows the flux of CO2 into the global ocean over time. And the cyan lines are estimates of global uptake from data from measurements of CO2, surface CO2. The blue line's are model output, and the black is the average. And that's what's used in global carbon budgeting, that number in the black line. It shows a few things. Firstly, there's an increase with time, as you expect. The CO2 is going up in the atmosphere, it drives more carbon into the ocean, and that's causing the root cause of ocean acidification. There's interannual variability. The other thing it's showing is that there's a divergence over time between models and data. And the reason for that isn't really obvious. There could be a bias in the sampling of the data, or it could be there's observing capacity has really declined in the past since 2018. And you can see in the bottom right of that figure, the coverage over time, and it's dropping off. And it's really trying to reverse that. I think, we're getting to the point now where our observation and capacity is declining. We need to reverse that. And there are groups like the Surface Ocean CO2 Reference Network called SOCONET, which was just established within GOOS to try and reverse that trend and improve the data quality and coverage. So things are happening, but they're happening slowly. The same can be said for GOA-ON. We need to maintain the sections, the deep water column sections throughout the ocean to get a better understanding of how acidification is changing, not just at the surface. And there are other tools available now to help fill the gaps with new technology, including sail drones, autonomous vehicles like sail drones and biogeochemical photo floats, which are going to help improve that coverage. They're still, they're still limited in what they can do. But I think in the open ocean, we have the opportunity at least to get a much better coverage and improve the uptake estimates and understand how ocean acidification conditions or carbonate chemistry is changing with time. The bigger challenge is probably in the shelf. And I'll just show an example here. The shelf waters are undergoing massive change. There's warming, freshening, stratification, there's ice retreat. They're all related. And how you disentangle all these effects on ecosystems is really tough. It requires some very careful thought about an observing system for ecosystems and ocean acidification or water chemistry. I just want to show one example here on the right, on the left. This is, in 2008, we did a survey off the Mertz Polynya. And what we found fairly extensive beds of aragonitic corals and sponges at 800 metres. These were in waters that were slightly above saturation. What was happening, what appears to be happening, is in the summertime, the waters in the Polynya, there was a high biological production that was drawing down carbon. It was providing a good increased saturation state. That water was then flowing out past the where these beds exist and delivering energy or food. And there are probably multiple reasons why they existed in that location, but nevertheless they did. In 2010, the glacier tongue broke off and the Polynya changed dramatically. The top left shows the change from blue, that was in before the tongue broke off. There was carbon drawdown on the surface, and then it really took off, and there was huge biological production occurring in that Polynya. How those corals and responded is not really known. I mean, you would expect that, well, the saturation state went up, so that might be better for them. It's not clear they actually were benefiting from the flow of water past the bed. So it's just one example of there's some very complex interactions occurring in shelf waters. And I think it points out too, there are some locations around Antarctica where there is historical data, and it would be useful to start hopefully identifying locations where there could be a focused study. This is just one example. It may not be the optimal. There are other locations around Antarctica. But I think, or I'm hoping that the Southern Ocean Hub will be able to start to work on some of these issues to not just get the offshore conditions, but what's happening on the shelf, at least in some locations. That's all I wanted to say. I think it's got a great deal of promise. It's taken a fair bit of time to set up the hub. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing what develops over the next few years. Thanks.
Thanks, Bronte. That's a great overview. Yeah, well, if we've started the hub, let's hope we can get some good impetus. And I think it's a really nice point that you make about there is historical data, and a lot of it's been from opportunistic or haphazard sampling, but we've actually got it there, so we could start to leverage that and maybe see how change is occurring. So thanks for coming. My name's Katerina, and I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what the Southern Ocean Acidification Hub is hoping to do and bring to the community. And I guess the rationale, Bronte's covered to some extent, why should we have a Southern Ocean OA hub? Most of the people in the room would know that it ranks amongst the most vulnerable ecosystems or areas of the ocean to ocean acidification. And while there's been a lot of fantastic work done individually by groups across the globe, we haven't found a really good way of making that a comprehensive network to be able to leverage all the work that's been done and make a coordinated effort. So we really lack information or integrated understanding of how that area is changing. The hub sits between, the uniqueness of this hub is it sits between the nexus of SOOS and GOA-ON. Lots of acronyms I had to learn about. But it's a really nice place because it's taking from both and also feeding into two really important global observation networks. So directly for SOOS, it feeds into one of their key challenges, which is to assess the extent and impact of ocean acidification in the Southern Ocean. And the best way to do that is to get everyone on board to help come up with what that might be. We all know the importance of the Southern Ocean in global biogeochemistry and oceanographic processes, so it's a really good focus area for the hub. And one of the most other beneficial things of the nexus of where it sits is it can link in with other hubs, and Bronte did show that network with GOA-ON. So where it meets, the three major oceans all meet around the Southern Ocean at that circumpolar interface, means it has a big influence on other regions of the world. So if we look at the current global ocean acidification observation network, that's where they all sit, approximately, as dots. Obviously not in Africa, but it's called the African hub. But you can see there's nothing at that southern juncture, and that's really a massive area of the ocean that is very relevant to everyone else. So I'm looking forward to linking in with the other hubs and finding out what they're doing, but also in particular maybe the Arctic hub, where we've got this, what's happening at both poles, what's similar, what's different, and what we can learn from that. So the purpose of the hub is really to provide a platform for coordination of interdisciplinary research and really tap into the diverse expertise of everyone doing research in the Southern Ocean on OA. We wanted to deliver research on OA that can be, to better understand its drivers, its biological implications and responses at not only the local scales, but also regional, so the whole Southern Ocean area. And it's ultimately going to be a conduit for communication, for research outcomes, and provide that mechanism to identify and prioritise emerging observational and research needs. So if we think about if Bronte said, look, we've got all this data, this is a great spot, why don't we look at this particular question in response to that? We can start a coordinated effort and see what ships are going there, what research groups are interested in, what different parameters we could measure. So it's a really nice way to start cross-talking and coordinating. Just before establishing the hub, we did a bit of a community consultation through a short survey, and we got a good cross mix of respondents representing different countries and different research fields of OA in the Southern Ocean. And the main thing that came out from that was really that we wanted to promote research and knowledge sharing, contribute to and augment the Southern Ocean OA data set, and improve current practice and collaborations. So that's where we sort of want to start, a good base. And the benefits for everyone else is that we would strengthen that network around the circumpolar area and assist greater collaboration. We could enable knowledge exchange, looking at the changes that are ongoing in carbonate chemistry, but also facilitate data sharing and filling gaps, either temporal, spatial, or organismal, that seem to currently exist. With respect to best practice protocols, there's already been a lot of work into best practice for OA, and there's a fantastic Bible that those in OA research would be utilising. But sometimes we may lack best practice protocols in data repository and the way we should be storing and uploading and sharing data. So maybe something there could be instigated and implemented to make sure that all that cross-comparative work can actually be achieved. And ultimately, because it's supported by both GOA-ON and SOOS, it really offers an excellent opportunity to improve the global understanding of OA, since up until now, that globe has ignored, to a large extent, the Southern Ocean. So I think that's an important gap to fill. With respect to governance, our structure is currently 3 co-chairs. This will go down to 2 co-chairs, but currently it's Kei Hong, Julie, and myself. And a leadership team that I'm hoping to put little pictures up into those boxes. That would be wonderful, as well as an APEC representative, so an ECR there would be great. And then, of course, the pool of open membership to the global community. So we're really looking to start filling those smiley faces and make new directions and action items and start moving on this hub. We have thanks to Julia, we have a wonderful webpage on the SOOS website with links for not only the overview, but also products that are generated from the group, as well as events to be advertised. And right now, there is a call for leadership team members and ECR representatives that is open. So that would be really nice to start seeing some applications roll in. So after me, can I just confirm with you, we have for just following me, we have Cara Nissen from the University of Colorado, who's going to give us a talk on their wonderful work that they've just done looking at acidification in the Southern Ocean, the current state and future projections. So looking forward to that. And following that, a little bit of a roundtable discussion. We do have people online as well, so it's not just those in the room, but we'll try and get everyone together. And there is it a Slido that you can click into if you want to put suggestions and comments, and that Slido will remain open for 1 week from today if you come up with something that you think of later on. But that's sort of going to be a record of our discussion board. And then we'll just do a quick wrap up with hopefully some action items and some start on our leadership team establishment. So that's all from me.
All right, beautiful. Well, I'll hand over to Cara now. Cara's going to do a presentation on acidification at the high latitudes in the Southern Ocean, and based off a paper that she's recently published that I'm sure she will tell us all about. And Cara's currently located at the University of Colorado in Boulder, although soon moving across to RV, if I have that correct.
Not quite. I used to be at RV. I'm moving to the University of Amsterdam for a faculty position.
Ah, there we go. Perfect.
All good. Okay, well, I cannot see anybody, but hi to everyone in the room or online. Thanks so much for the invitation to talk a little bit about my own work in the context of ocean acidification in the Southern Ocean. I'm taking a bit of a focus on the high latitude waters here and want to talk very briefly about current state of ocean acidification or knowledge thereof, as well as future projections. And this work is done in collaboration with people both at the University of Colorado Boulder and the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany. So it's great that Bronte has already touched on a lot of the points that I wanted to make today. And I think that, especially in recent times, there have been great advances in our ability to observe large-scale 3D trends in open ocean, Southern Ocean acidification. And what I'm showing here is an update of the ocean soda acidification product that was previously mentioned. And here I'm showing just surface acidification trends as published by Ma et al. This past year, which is based on ship-based observations and satellite information. And then we have a similar product that came out around the same time by Matt Maslov and colleagues, who've looked also at acidification trends over a slightly different period and based their analysis on ship-based data, including the BGC Argo floats and a data assimilating model. And what I want to point out here is that these products nicely illustrate the severity of ocean acidification in the Southern Ocean. But for the purpose of this talk, what I want to point out are the white areas here near the Antarctic continent, which is where we really don't have as many observations available to us to kind of monitor acidification rates in the present time. There's been another recent study published in the same year in GBC by Zhang and colleagues that used all available ship-based observations to come up with a best estimate of deep ocean acidification trends near the Antarctic continental shelf. But as you can see here, and I've just put the example for the Weddell Sea, the closer we get to the Antarctic continent, the larger our data gaps are. And this is, of course, not surprising, but I think it's worth kind of reminding ourselves that we really do not have a good handle on acidification rates on the Antarctic continental shelf. From a modeling perspective, we have a range of, I think, amazing tools to kind of study ocean acidification in the Southern Ocean and globally. In most cases, we use Earth system models to do these future projections. And this is just one example I picked by Hauri et al. That was published a couple of years ago that demonstrates the increase in aragonite undersaturation events under a high emission scenario as we move from the present day to the end of this century. If we move to the more recent generation of Earth system models, we have similar studies being published, really giving us a good estimate of kind of open ocean acidification levels for a wide range of emission scenarios. But I do want to point out that these Earth system models were not really designed to study acidification or any process for that matter very close to the Antarctic continent or in any coastal region for that matter. These models are still relatively coarse in resolution and lack important process representations, such as a coupling with the ice sheet in Antarctica or the representation of ice shelf cavities. This is why in my first postdoc, I've developed together with my collaborators a new modeling tool that was specifically designed to study acidification and other processes in the high latitude Southern Ocean. And here I'm just showing you a map of the grid resolution in this model. It's the global model FISM 1.4 coupled to the biogeochemical model RECOM. So it's a global model, but I'm just showing here the resolution in the Southern Ocean. And you can see that as we move closer to the Antarctic continent, our model resolution actually increases drastically, going up to about 2 kilometers in the ice shelf cavities, which are included in our model simulations. We use this model to kind of run present day and future scenarios of both ocean physics and biogeochemistry. And the picture I've shown on the title slide is actually output from this model. What is shown here is the model-based bottom anthropogenic carbon concentration in the 1990s. And what can be nicely seen here is that these bottom concentrations are unsurprisingly highest in the waters that are the shallowest, so the Antarctic, on the Antarctic continental shelf. And it's really only in areas downstream of these main Antarctic bottom water formation regions that this anthropogenic carbon signal kind of spills into the open ocean and can spread into the global deep ocean. So this is mainly seen for the Weddell Sea here and the Ross Sea, that then this signal is spreading around the Antarctic continent. As I said, we've used this model to run future projections, and here I've just picked some results of our study. So my apologies if your favorite region is a different sector of the Southern Ocean. Here I'm showing results of the Weddell Sea. In particular, I'm showing results averaged for the proposed marine protected area in the Weddell Sea, as shown here in the top right. And what I'm showing here are anthropogenic carbon concentrations now as a function of depth and time for the highest emission scenario that we've run. And I split the analysis into open ocean waters and shelf waters. And then what I want to point out here is the slope of these isolines, the black ones. I always say, pick your favorite. Let's look at the dashed one, for example. And I want you to compare the slopes in the two panels. And you can quickly see that any anthropogenic carbon signal that invades the ocean at the surface is way more quickly communicated to the deep ocean in these Antarctic coastal waters than it is the case for the open ocean waters. And this is due to the tight link with physical processes that were already mentioned. So because there's like these precursors of Antarctic bottom water that are formed in these regions, we really have strong vertical mixing processes that efficiently transport this anthropogenic carbon all the way to the seafloor in these coastal waters. Just to a quick side note, if we talk about the Weddell Sea in particular that I've studied most from this model output, I want to point out that for this highest emission scenario, we actually have a slowdown in the Weddell Sea MPA of the rate of bottom pH decline over the 21st century. And this is also related to kind of changes in the physical system, because in a different study, we've shown that the ability of this region to form Antarctic bottom waters or the precursors thereof abruptly stops or drastically declines towards the end of the 21st century. So we really have kind of this two-way interaction of physical and biogeochemical processes that can either act to kind of accelerate acidification, but can also act kind of slow down acidification depending on where you look. Switching gears and just to look a bit at calcium carbonate saturation states, that were already mentioned today as well. I'm here plotting a volume distribution of different calcium carbonate saturation states for aragonite on the left and calcite on the right, with here the reddish colors denoting undersaturation with respect to aragonite already present in the 1990s, but not in the surface waters in this case. And here I'm looking at the whole proposed Weddell Sea MPA. If I look throughout or across all scenarios that we've run it's really kind of terrifying if we look at it, because even for the intermediate scenario, SSP 245, but surely for the two highest emission scenarios, we really have almost the entire water column in the Weddell Sea in the top 2,000 meters is undersaturated year-round with respect to aragonite. With respect to calcite, situation is a little better as expected, but also there, I want to point out that for the two highest emission scenarios, our model projects between 25 and just over 50% of the water column in this region to be undersaturated. So just to kind of reiterate on the point I've made on the previous slide, if we kind of separately look at the continental shelf only, we do see the same signal in that the aragonite and calcite saturation states are drastically lower for the end of the centuries than for the whole area combined. So I think I made my point clear that I think coastal waters are projected to experience more severe levels of ocean acidification than open ocean waters due to the distinct local interactions between ocean physics and biogeochemistry. And it was already kind of alluded to, this was all published in a paper earlier this year, where we've looked at all existing and proposed marine protected areas around the Antarctic continent and provide a lot more detail, a lot more variables. If you're interested, I invite you to have a look at that. And I really want to kind of finish on the point that these adopted or proposed marine protected areas, they do span a big portion of the Antarctic coastal waters. And we know that ocean acidification has pronounced impacts on species on several trophic levels, be it phytoplankton or juvenile species of zooplankton or fish. There's a lot we don't understand yet, but a lot of impacts have been documented. But still, we don't have a good measure for the carbonate chemistry evolution in these waters in the present day and in the future, which I think is essential if we want to have a good handle on assessing ecosystem health in these regions, but also to evaluate the effectiveness of any marine protected area that we have established or plan to establish in these waters. And with that, I want to stop here, and I'm happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Cara. Are there any questions for Cara before we move on to a discussion? I have a small one for you. Yes. I don't know if you can see me, so I'll just...
I can.
My question was, I guess, with your models around the coast, would this hold true for every coastal area? Is that already known? So coastal systems versus open ocean systems, yes. Because of that coupling, it's going to always be exacerbated?
Yes. So the degree to which the shelf waters are kind of more affected than open ocean, that will depend on the sector, and that will depend on how much of the dense shelf water is produced in a particular area. So how kind of strong that vertical mixing really is. But in our study, we do find that general signal throughout the Southern Ocean.
But even if we move away from there too, could you hypothesize with another continent, for example? Is it
with another continent?
Yeah.
I think that's more difficult because it really, I mean, it's in our case, it's really tightly coupled to that physical setting of having that sea ice formation that kind of makes the waters denser and brings that carbon signal down in the water column. So I feel like as long as you have some densification process, I would say the same holds for other areas. But given that this is a very Antarctica specific process, I would say, yeah, it's pretty unique to that system. But I wouldn't say, I mean, I just haven't studied other coastal areas enough. There might be other physical processes. I guess I'm just kind of advocating for really the holistic approach and kind of considering the physical change as well. Thanks for that.
Sarah? Any other questions? Yes.
Hey, Cara, nice to see you. It's Joellen. Sorry, I'm on the other side of the road.
Yeah, I can see you, but hi, Joellen.
Sorry, hey. How dependent is your model results to your physical climate future sort of conditions? The reason is just there's such a split between the models that actually show a recovering ozone hole and the ones that show it extending into January forever, until 2080, 2090. So does it matter to the coastal regions?
So it's a great question. It's a good point because it's the obvious weakness. It's one model. We force it with output from one climate model. So I wish we had an ensemble to kind of get a bit of a handle on the uncertainty. So I do think it matters.
Are you in the middle? Are you kind of in the middle range? Are you to the high or the low?
I think we're in the middle. We've assessed the RV climate model in comparison to the other CMIP, and if I remember the details correctly, it's sitting very much in the middle for those regions.
All right.
So it's not,
excellent.
yeah, so exactly. So it's not exactly, we're not at the high end in terms of crazy high scenarios in that sense that we're forcing it with, yeah, crazy unrealistic conditions compared to other models. But yes, but it's true. In our study, we've quantified the contribution of these climate change feedbacks, and they kind of contributed about 20% to kind of bottom changes in pH.
Ooh.
So it's quite significant. So it's like it's often like, oh, climate change feedbacks do not matter. Well, I think at high latitudes they do matter quite substantially. So it would be great to have more models to kind of go about and look at these questions and get a bit of a better handle at constraining those numbers from a model perspective too. But yeah, but it's a great point.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Kara. And good luck in Amsterdam. When are you going?
I'm moving in 3 weeks. So
so exciting. Woohoo.
Starting in January. So yeah. Thanks, guys.
I don't know, but the time zone might have worked better here than Amsterdam, so we might be lucky you were here first.
Yeah, I absolutely was. Still an okay time Monday evening.
All right, well, we might just open the floor. I know everyone wants to be quiet, but see if we can get a bit of feedback on some of the discussion points. And really, there's only one. We were very frugal in our questions, and we thought we'll just leave it at one and start the ideas flowing on how we might want to build a Southern Ocean OA community. And I guess some of the ideas Elise and I didn't even introduce you. I'm assuming everyone knows you. Elise Hancock. Does everyone know Elise? Yeah, excellent. She's been wonderful in this process as a SOOS executive. Yes. And I guess Elise and I were bantering about what we could put up as ideas, and I think they were around. Let's see, now I don't have my notes. How to build a community. So is it something we want to maybe work towards a paper or synthesis on the state of knowledge and a summary or a white paper for summary to policymakers, some sort of way of coalescing everyone's work that's being done and the interests that are in Antarctic or Southern Ocean OA research? Do we want to have quarterly workshops and online meetings to discuss current up-to-date science, and people could present at these or raise questions at these and have those interactions? Do we just want web announcement and activities in that way? So I guess we can do all of them as well. So it's not at least, but it was just to sort of start dialogue on what, if you've been involved in other communities and hubs, what did you find worked really well? What would you like to see? How would you like everyone to meet and get to know each other? So everything. Ruth wants everything. Excellent.
And I think having opportunities like this where there's a physical, there might be a conference somewhere where there's physical opportunity to gather as a side meeting. So online is great, but I think we're all craving warm bodies in the room. So looking ahead to the important conferences and meetings, and seeing if there can be
opportunities to get together. Yeah, absolutely.
I'd love to see a community organized effort to sort of settle some of the carbon brawl going on over, we're arguing tooth and nail now about greening seasonally in the Southern Ocean and what the impact is, both on the anthropogenic and on the natural carbon systems. We're absolutely going to have it out tooth and nail with the Global Carbon Project because of the difference between the model products and the OBS products. And who would you go ask? I mean, sure, you could go ask Bronte. We have a carbon community globally, but a Southern Ocean, specifically acidification, where you're moving towards the ecosystem impacts, not just the physical carbon, which you have to do with the physical circulation, but with all the big brains that are thinking about where this is going. Because at this point, who would you ask? If you were a policymaker and you were worried about this, who would you even go to? I mean, there are all these different groups, but not none of them are really this Southern Ocean, which is the biggest uncertainty. If you look at the Global Carbon Project numbers, I mean, this is it. This is where their biggest uncertainty is in ocean carbon, specifically the Southern Ocean. And the fact that the models and the obs are getting it different, the fact that we can't agree on what the satellites say about seasonal greening and whether we're going to get greener or not, which would be bad. I mean, there needs to be a community group that is, you know, banging their heads on this hard with a group of people of expertise is not focused just on the hard physical chemistry or just on the oceanography, but on the full on what is going on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, absolutely.
I'm just worried about it. And who would you ask?
It's a good question. No, I agree. I think it's a main goal is to try and bring all those expertise in one room and say, yes, but what's actually happening? Because you can be very focused on your area. Yeah, it's a great question. I certainly know nothing about modelling, so it's, you know, there's a lot of scope to learn and interact with.
If you go to the SMVAL tool, there is 2 sets of ocean diagnostics, one of which has any carbon in it, and it's just the Southern Ocean one, and it's just because my group put it in. So when we go to what would you actually be able to cookie cutter out from the CMIP models, that's it. And it's not enough. It's not anywhere near enough compared to the challenge. So getting a bigger, more focused community on the.
And so what do you think might be a way forward to make that happen? Do you think a working group on a paper to start, even if it's a white paper or
I think it'd
synthesis?
Be great. Yeah? Actually, I think at this point, this community is the one that needs to answer whether the Southern Ocean. I mean, what is happening and where and how quickly is absolutely essential. And I would argue that the Earth system models right now go like this. You know, half of them go, oh, dead Southern Ocean, no greening. The other half go, woo, totally green. And then you've got the other ones who are like, oh, upwell, acidification everywhere, all the pteropods die. And the other model's like, no, stratification and greening because iron fertilization and it's fabulous. And you're like, yeah, those both can't both be equally right. That is not okay. So at this point, I mean, there's such an opportunity. Mm-hmm. And really, everybody else can argue about the North Atlantic, but boy, this is more fun. And I would argue more important.
Cool. Anyone else in the room?
I could probably add to that and say that the Hub was invited to give a presentation at the COP29.
I bet you were.
And it was a fairly last minute invitation and a bit of a scramble between a few of us to pull something together. And I presented that in on Friday night, and the recording is available for anybody that's interested in listening to it. But I finished my PhD on the effects of ocean acidification on microbial communities in 2019 and was emailing around the community trying to find out what's the latest research that's come out since then. And we'd obviously seen the fantastic work that Cara has done in trying to prepare for this workshop, but thought I must be missing a lot of other things that have been done between now and then, and there is very little. Most of the time the responses I was getting back was Cara's paper or my own papers. And so I think there's definitely, right, we don't have a good state of the knowledge at the moment, and we're not providing information to policy and decision makers, and they're asking for it.
Well, we just got our SOCOM-3 third round of funding, so there'll be BGC-Argo floats going into the Southern Ocean for the next 3 to 4 years. For sure, it's $10 million of equipment we'll be throwing into the ocean and begging you to hoik on whatever ship you're going out on. But we're arguing ourselves. We just had our big science kickoff meeting 2 weeks ago, and for SOCOM, and it is Oscar, Schofield, and I are, on the greening only in the summer. The winter's going to get worse. The mixed layer depth is going to be light limiting. You're all screwed. And of course, Lynn and Steve Reiser and Ken Johnson are like, no, it won't be that bad. We're going to get stratification. So I'll just say, we have a boatload of SOCOM papers with pH sensors on them that are, and we even threw 3 into the Ross Sea They're not on an Argo timescale, so they don't count as BGC Argo technically because they're not on an Argo. We had them cycle more shallowly so that we could get, more frequently than an Argo profile would. But all that data is public too. So, and we had a bunch pop up into Polynias, and I say a bunch, not just one or two, but like, I'd say several, maybe not many, actually popping up and down into Polynias at this point. So we do have data that we've never seen before. Mostly they're just, they give us lots of money for equipment, but not so much money for people. So, and we need more ecosystem side to go with. Because the biological end of this is we have chlorophyll sensors, radiometer, backscatter, fluorescence, but we don't have actual ecosystem measurements. So all kinds of fun things going on in acidification work in the Southern Ocean. We've never had so many pH measurements, but fewer ship days.
Yeah. And I think that's also why the hub, where the hub could help, is finding out who's going, when they're going, what they can collect, who they can help with, because I think there's been a bit of a slowdown for various reasons across the globe in ship time and field work and field activity.
I think a lot of the focus too has been on the physical oceanography changes and the change in ice interaction, and less actually on the more immediate happening right now, already a screaming problem on the acidification side. I mean, folks have been kind of ignoring the carbon flux. I mean, it's really only 1 in 4 carbon molecules that comes out of anybody's tailpipe anywhere in the world. Only 1 in 4 that goes in around Antarctica. I mean, no big deal.
Yeah.
So I can add into Katarina's point there around sharing opportunities, and so SOOS has a logistical database South. It's hosted by the European Polar Board as part of their larger Polardex database, and it provides upcoming expedition data to the Southern Ocean. And a whole arm to that isn't actually up at the moment is a project site. So it's not just who's going where, when, but what they're actually doing. It's a side we struggle to ever get information into, because for the upcoming expedition or logistics data, we can go into logistics managers. Some of it's publicly available and we can pull it in from websites. We get it from ComNat for National Antarctic Programs, IATO for tourism vessels, CAMLAR for fisheries vessels. But the projects themselves is a lot harder for us to get that information. We'd probably spend in our entire project office staff time if we were trying to pull it all together. But I think that if there's a community like this that information is really useful for, and you're committed to putting in your own information from your own countries or the networks that you're aware of, that's why we could build that up. We could definitely then have ways we can filter that to working groups so that we can provide all the ocean acidification information that could be going out through a newsletter or a bulletin or something. It's definitely something we've got the facilities there to do. It's ready. It's just turned off at the moment. It just needs people to want it. Well, no, I think the people are there that want it, but the people able to put information into it is what it's lacking at the moment. So if that's of interest, that's definitely something we could build up on that side.
SOTs still do their carbon. They still do the carbon measurements every trip. But it's not there's no onboard system that used to be on the Aurora. Is that?
They still take the DIC samples and they measure the pH and stuff on those.
So there's 2 data streams. There's the deployment data from the site, and then there's bookending the ranges. There's calibration data, and they're good opportunities that if anyone's got like a particular interest in that part of the ocean or the subantarctic, to talk to Elizabeth Shadwick and our carbon chemists about taking extra samples. Maybe this is the sort of thing that we can also advertise as where there's berths and gaps coming up. But we like to do as much calibration as possible on those voyages. We really have only got that one trip per year, and if another vessel happens to be passing, we'll get some additional water taken. But because that is a long-term time series, it's relatively easy to plan into the future that, you know, I want to get this additional type of measurements, and we've got some capacity to do extra CTDs for people when they're on board. So I think on that front, I was thinking earlier in Bronte's presentation and yours, you're talking about like harvesting data sets. I mean, what's the model for that? Because we've obviously got all the IMOS data, and like we quantify, you know, calcifying organisms in a number of IMOS programs, but we don't want to duplicate AODN. So how
does it work with AODN and the SOOS?
So SOOS has our observational database is SOOSmap. It's hosted and maintained for us by the European Marine Observing Data Network. We tend to more go to global aggregators of global data rather than the AODN specifically. So, for example, we're pulling all of SOCAT's latest releases available through SOOSmap. Much of GLODAP, if not all of GLODAP, it's one we're working on at the moment, is available through SOOSmap. SOTS, we at least have the metadata available, but it's on our hit list of working through to get that.
So you would like to have SOTS data on there?
Yes. Yeah. So we've got a larger SOOS mooring network available through SOOSmap. At the moment, it is only metadata. And so we've got a project officer who's working on SOOSmap at the moment, and one of the ones they're looking at quite specifically at the moment is the mooring network and trying to make that data available. So, but essentially to come into SOOSmap, it needs to be standardised data and ideally a global aggregation, because we just purely lack the resources to be trying to pull data from all over the world, because obviously we're needing quite a large number of countries' data. And so that's something where SOCAT and GLODAP is really, really useful. And we definitely need to come and talk to you about SOCOM to make sure we've got all the data available from SOCOM through SOOSmap as well. I hope that answers the question.
Oh, and the other thing is sample repositories. You know, we have an amazing sample archive with sediment traps over the last 30 or so years, and there's a story in there of, you know, lots of material. So rather than going out and collecting more samples and trying to get a 30-year data set, you know, there are sample repositories in existence that, you know, again, need to be talking to PIs, but that could be a resource that could be advertised. We'd love people to come and work on the samples, especially for the biodiversity and the, you know, which organisms are changing in response to which environmental signals. So
I'd love to see SOOS go even further, though. You've had Matt Maslov's like enthusiastic and beloved participation. He adores SOOS, and the BGC state estimate that he has created using the float data and the satellite data and everything else, and GLODAP and WOS and everything you get his hands on. It's the kitchen sink. But what would be really awesome is, since basically we've created a on-demand sort of snapshot, so you can simply drop down menu, say what you'd like to see. But what would be fun is if you could actually put your new data on it. Basically say, here's the comparison, here's my new data, and here's what the state estimate says, the modeled data assimilation says is there, you know, and how far off is it? Wouldn't it be fun if it were color-coded and it said, wow, you have data that does not at all look like the data assimilation, which means the data assimilation has problems, right? Or, but right now we don't have any sort of real-time way to check our data against a data assimilation like that. And it's in near real time, meaning it's being updated, you know, nearly monthly at this point. So if you had data from last year, you could go plot it up against this, but it would be so much more fun to be able to just do that like as a matter of course, instead of having to do some big data pull / whatever. It's just it's a simple lookup at this point. You know, it's all available. And the computer brains to do this are cheap and easy. SOOSmap is great, but what if SOOSmap had real, like, data assimilated data, you know, rather than just here's what happened, why not, and actually here's what it is, what we think it is so far. Your data is even more valuable.
Definitely, we be something we can look at. I probably will add in here though, SOOS is incredibly limited in resources at the moment. A very small office, EMONet are doing this in kind, and SOOS actually doesn't have funding after the end.
What if we did it and you linked to it?
We can definitely do that.
I mean, it's not a
Together on how to do that, but yes,
Matt runs all of his data assimilation at the University of Arizona because I am spoiled and I can do that. So it's the sort of thing though that we would like to see it accelerate the comparison between our best estimate, a state estimate, you know, a reanalysis basically of BGC for the Southern Ocean, which is now being expanded to BGOSI instead of BSOSI. It's no longer the Biogeochemical Southern Ocean State Estimate. It's the Biogeochemical Global Ocean State Estimate, which is it was our new thing under SOCOM 3. So, but we have we have 10 years of measurements now from the floats, and we're so near real-time data assimilation for the last 10 years.
Joel, does that include, you can do comparisons with underway data?
Yeah. Seth Bashinsky's already published a paper on that, showing that the discrepancy basically between our data and SOCAT is basically seasonality. There's a tremendous bias to summer for SOCAT. For all the PCO2 surface underway is, as you know, we've always known, nobody likes to work in the Southern Ocean in the winter. But the floats have a lot of data. And then there's the under ice. We have a lot of under ice data because all of BGC Argo is under ice capable. Argo is not, that is not so. It's only been recently that Argo floats have been under ice capable, so they just didn't deploy them underneath. But we've done that since 2012.
All right.
Going back to opportunities, it'd be nice to identify which countries are running ships, research ships into the Southern Ocean and where the data is. I think there's a lot of opportunities that are missed, including in Australia. Perhaps we need to understand what's being measured and what's not being measured, and what the opportunities are to improve the coverage. And
definitely.
Is your lovely icebreaker getting PCO2 now?
Yeah. Long story.
All right, we have actually run to the end of our time, but I think like I said, the Slido will be left open to keep putting things in and ideas in, chatting, but I think these are some action items that have started that Elise has been noting, but I think it's a really good conversation, but I also it would be really nice to have people sign up, because then we can have these more detailed conversations and some action plans to come out, including white papers, real papers. I shouldn't say that amongst people that write white papers, but science papers. But also, like you say, just getting that community together so we find out which boats have measurements, which floats have measurements, what we can start to use to make it a much more comprehensive and well understood region of the ocean, because it is the most important one that we seem to be missing.
Seems like a paper to kick off with the Southern Ocean carbon and acidification train wreck.
Yeah, okay.
Would be fantastic.
Title already written, great.
Well, it's a massive problem, and one that we have a ton of expertise on, but not enough worldwide attention.
All right, well, let's make that the top action item. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thank you all for coming. And I look forward to hearing from you and working with you as we go forward. Thank you so much, Cara.
Thank you. Bye.